Staff Sergeant Emily Hayes adjusted her position on the rocky slope, the cold bite of Afghanistan's Hindu Kush Mountains seeping through her modified ghillie suit. 800 meters below, 4 men from SEAL Team 6 moved through the pine forest with the unmistakable confidence of America's elite warriors. Their spacing and pace reflected years of combat experience and the dangerous certainty that they faced no immediate threat. Lieutenant Michael Davidson's dismissive words from that morning's briefing still hung in the air between them. "Stay back with the vehicles while real operators handled this," he had said, not even looking at her as he addressed his team. The other SEALs had exchanged knowing glances, their silent agreement more cutting than any verbal insult. Emily had said nothing. Instead, she had moved under cover of darkness to establish this overwatch position long before dawn broke. Now, as morning light spilled across the mountains, she methodically adjusted the focus on her Leupold Mark 5 HD 5 25x optic with Horus H59 reticle. The scope was perfectly zeroed for her M2010 enhanced sniper rifle. The stock adjusted for her frame, drop verified out to 1,200 meters in Afghan atmospheric conditions. At 31, Emily moved with the calculated patience her grandfather had taught her. Each breath came in a rhythm born from thousands of hours behind a rifle. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, wait for 4. The crosshair settled on a shadow that seemed slightly out of place among the rocks ahead of the SEAL team's path. Something reflective where only stone and scrub should be. Her eyes narrowed. This wasn't just terrain observation. This was recognition. Montana, 1997. "Breathe like the mountain breathes," John Hayes told his 8-year-old granddaughter as they lay prone on the ridge overlooking their property. "Slow and steady, same as the earth beneath you." Emily's small hands gripped the heavily modified Remington 700 bolt-action rifle, the stock cut down to fit her frame. The scope was set at its lowest magnification, but even so, it seemed to pull the distant metal targets at the edge of the meadow, so close she could almost touch them. "Remember what I told you about breathing?" her grandfather continued, his voice as weathered as the mountains around them. At 72, John Hayes moved with the careful precision of a man who had learned the value of deliberate motion. His left hand, missing the last 2 fingers, adjusted Emily's grip on the stock. "Breathe in for 4, Emily recited. "Hold for 4, exhale for 4, wait for 4. "And when do you take the shot?" At the bottom of the breath, in the stillness between heartbeats. John smiled, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening. "That's what kept me alive at Chosen." Emily knew the stories by heart. Her grandfather had been a Marine sniper during the Korean War, with 41 confirmed kills at the Chosen Reservoir in 1950. But there were other missions, ones he spoke of only in fragments, with long silences between words. Missions that came after Korea, when the Cold War turned hot in places that never made the newspapers. "This will be your first cold bore shot of the day," John said, using the technical term for the first round fired through a cool barrel. "It'll fly differently than your follow-up shots. Remember that?" Emily nodded, her small face serious beneath her camouflage cap. The target was a steel plate, 8 inches in diameter, placed 300 yards down the valley. For most children, an impossible shot for Emily. Under her grandfather's tutelage, it was expected. "When you're ready," John whispered. Emily controlled her breathing, feeling her heartbeat slow as she relaxed into position. The crosshairs settled on the center of the target. She took up the slack in the trigger, pressure increasing until the rifle surprised her with its report. The distinctive ring of lead on steel echoed back a moment later. "Good," John nodded. "But not perfect. You flinched at the end." Later that evening, as they walked back to the cabin, John's expression grew solemn. "Emily, there's something I need to tell you about. Something that might matter someday." He described a man named Anton Petrov, a KGB officer and Spetsnaz operative nicknamed the Ghost during the Cold War. John's voice grew harder as he recounted their encounter in Berlin, 1962. "He was the most dangerous man I ever faced," John said, tracing the scar on his own forearm. I left him with a scar from his left eye to his jawline. He swore he'd find me one day, even if it took decades." "What happened to him?" young Emily had asked. "He disappeared in '89 when the wall fell. They say he died, but—" John looked toward the distant mountains. "Men like Petrov don't just die, they wait." Emily blinked, returning to the present. The glint of metal in the rocks below wasn't natural. Someone had established a position with direct line of sight to the SEAL team's projected path. She keyed her radio. "Davidson, possible ambush at your 2 o'clock, approximately 600 meters. Recommend immediate course adjustment." The SEAL leader's response came immediately. "Negative, Hayes. Maintain radio discipline unless contact is confirmed. Out." Emily bit back her frustration. Through her scope, she continued scanning the area ahead of the SEAL team. The reflected light had disappeared, but now she noticed something else disturbing, a bush that hadn't been there during yesterday's reconnaissance. Her grandfather's words echoed in her mind. "The landscape speaks. You just need to learn its language." She adjusted her scope's parallax for the exact range, already compensating for the half-mil hold required by the 3.5 miles per hour's crosswind from the west. Her trigger finger rested indexed along the receiver as she tracked the SEAL team's movement while keeping the suspicious area in her peripheral vision. The first burst of PKM machine gun fire erupted from a concealed position 200 meters to the SEALs' north, forcing them into a hasty defensive position behind fallen logs that offered minimal cover. Emily immediately began scanning for the source, counting muzzle flashes to identify positions. Davidson's voice exploded over the radio, calling for immediate close air support, but the nearest Apache helicopters were 25 minutes out from Bagram. Emily tracked the muzzle flashes to a fortified position built into the hillside, counting at least 12 fighters in mutually supporting positions that created interlocking fields of fire. Through her scope, she caught a glimpse of a weapon system she recognized from her grandfather's Cold War photographs, a specialized PKM with an unusual forward grip and modified stock, a design she'd only seen in the old Soviet weapons manuals John had collected. This wasn't standard Taliban equipment. This was specialized Cold War-era hardware that should have been destroyed decades ago. As she shifted her focus, she spotted a figure moving differently than the others. While most fighters moved with the characteristic erratic rhythm of guerrilla warfare, this man moved with military precision, directing others with hand signals that reflected formal training. Through her scope, Emily caught a glimpse of his face, older, weathered, but unmistakable, with the long scar running from his left eye to his jawline. Anton Petrov, the ghost. Her grandfather's warning flashed through her mind. If you ever see a man with a scar like that, don't hesitate, shoot immediately. But the SEAL team was her priority now. They were pinned down, taking effective fire from 3 directions. The classic near-side L-shaped ambush would collapse their position within minutes if they couldn't break contact. Emily identified a Taliban fighter setting up an RPG position with clear shots on the SEAL's cover. Her first shot broke clean at 740 meters, the .300 Winchester Magnum round striking true before the fighter's spotter realized what had happened. She worked the bolt smoothly, acquiring the spotter who was reaching for the RPG, and put him down with a high chest shot that spun him backward into the rocks. The radio filled with confused chatter as the SEALs tried to identify where the supporting fire had originated. Garrett was calling out targets while Rodriguez's saw hammered at the hillside, but they were taking effective fire from multiple directions. Emily identified the tactical leader by his hand, signals a fighter wearing a chest rig with a Motorola radio who kept displacing between positions to coordinate the attack. She led him by 2 feet as he moved between covered positions, waiting for him to pause at a gap in the rocks. When he stopped to key his radio, she sent a round through his upper thoracic cavity, watching him drop mid-transmission. The Taliban attack intensified after losing their leader. Fighters advanced in pairs, while others provided suppressive fire that kept the SEALs pinned behind rapidly disintegrating cover. Emily systematically engaged threats based on proximity to the SEAL team, her shots coming every 4 to 5 seconds with mechanical precision. A fighter with an RPG at 600 meters fell to her next shot. His ammunition bearer at 620 meters followed seconds later. A PKM team moved to enfilade the SEAL position from 800 meters. 3 shots later, both gunner and assistant gunner were down. Her rifle barrel warmed with sustained fire, but she maintained her breathing discipline, calling wind corrections to herself while tracking multiple targets through her scope. Through her optic, Emily caught a glimpse of Rodriguez taking fire. The round struck his shoulder, spinning him backward. Garrett immediately broke cover, dragging Rodriguez behind a more substantial boulder, while Davidson and Park maintained suppressive fire with their remaining ammunition. The Taliban fighters had stopped advancing, confused by the systematic elimination of their leadership and heavy weapons teams. In under 5 minutes, Emily had neutralized 7 confirmed threats at ranges varying from 400 to 900 meters, each shot calculated for wind, elevation, and the target's movement pattern. As she scanned for additional threats, Emily spotted movement on the eastern ridge, a figure moving with purpose away from the battlefield, carrying what appeared to be a hard-sided case. Even at this distance, the deliberate movement pattern was distinctive. Emily's breath caught. It was Petrov, escaping while his men provided covering fire. A critical decision moment arrived. Emily could continue supporting the SEAL team, ensuring their survival until the Apache helicopters arrived, or she could track the escaping Petrov, potentially eliminating the man her grandfather had hunted decades ago. She made her decision. The SEALs were her immediate responsibility. Petrov would have to wait. Emily returned her attention to the remaining Taliban fighters, methodically eliminating those who posed the greatest threat to the SEAL team. The Apache helicopters arrived 18 minutes later, their 30mm chain guns finishing what her precision fire had started. When the dust settled and the medevac helicopter departed with Rodriguez, Emily made her way down to the extraction point where Davidson was debriefing the remainder of his team. He fell silent as she approached, his expression unreadable behind tactical sunglasses. "That was you up there?" he said finally. It wasn't a question. Emily nodded once, slinging her rifle across her back. 9 confirmed kills, Garrett said, his arm wrapped in a pressure bandage from shrapnel. At extended ranges under combat conditions, that's some of the best shooting I've ever seen. Davidson removed his sunglasses, meeting Emily's eyes directly. "I was wrong," he said, the admission clearly difficult for him. "About you, about what you bring to the fight." It wasn't an apology, but in the culture of special operations, it was as close as one might get. Emily simply nodded her acknowledgement. "We need to talk about what we encountered," she said. "That wasn't a standard Taliban element. The weapons, the tactics, the coordination, something else is happening here." Davidson frowned. "What do you mean?" The individual directing the ambush was using Soviet-era tactics, specifically tactics developed by Spetsnaz advisors during the Soviet-Afghan War, and he escaped with what appeared to be a hard case, possibly containing intelligence. Garrett stepped closer, interest sharpening his features. "You're saying we encountered a professionally trained commander?" Emily nodded. "I believe we encountered Anton Petrov, nicknamed the Ghost during the Cold War, one of the most dangerous KGB operatives of the era." "How do you know about this?" Davidson asked, suspicion returning to his voice. Emily hesitated. "Family history. My grandfather operated against him during the Cold War." Before Davidson could press further, Lieutenant Colonel William Anderson arrived in a dust-covered Humvee, jumping out before it fully stopped. "Hayes," he called, "I just reviewed the UAV footage. 9 confirmed enemy, KIA, all precision shots from your position." He turned to Davidson. "Your team owes her their lives, Lieutenant." Davidson's jaw tightened slightly, but he nodded. "We were lucky to have her overwatch, sir." That evening, as Emily cleaned her rifle in the armory, Garrett approached carrying something wrapped in a bandana. He unwrapped it, revealing a SEAL Team Challenge coin. "This is only given to individuals who directly save a team member's life," he explained, placing it on the table beside her. "You earned it today." Emily picked up the coin, feeling its weight. "Thank you." After Garrett left, Emily returned to her quarters, finally opening the envelope her father had given her from her grandfather. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten message. Emily, if you're reading this, you've followed the path I always knew you would. The mountains you're in now hold secrets from my time with the agency. Look for a man called Petrov, the ghost. He knows things about Operation North Star that were never declassified. Trust your instincts. They're better than mine ever were. The greatest advantage in combat is to be underestimated. Use it wisely. With pride, Grandpa. Emily stared at the letter, a chill running through her. How could her grandfather have known, years before, that she would encounter a figure from his past? What was Operation North Star? And most importantly, what secrets did the ghost still hold after all these decades? The next morning, a Black Hawk helicopter landed at the forward operating base. As its rotor slowed, Colonel Robert Harrison stepped onto the tarmac. At 74, Harrison moved with the deliberate efficiency of a man who had spent decades in the shadows of American intelligence operations. His eyes scanned the assembled personnel, settling on Emily with quiet recognition. Lieutenant Colonel Anderson met him with a crisp salute. "Colonel Harrison, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow." Harrison returned the salute. "Plans change when ghosts appear, Bill." He looked directly at Emily. "Staff Sergeant Hayes, I need to speak with you immediately." Inside a secure briefing room, Harrison activated an electronic counter-surveillance device, a level of security that seemed extreme, even for a special operations debriefing. "Emily," he said, his tone shifting from formal to familiar. "What I'm about to tell you is classified well above your current clearance level. The only reason you're being brought into this is because Petrov has apparently made you a target." "Because of my grandfather," Emily said. "It wasn't a question." Harrison nodded. John Hayes was more than just a Marine sniper. After Korea, he was recruited into a special CIA program focused on countering Soviet influence in strategic regions. During the Cold War, he ran multiple operations against Soviet special advisors, including Petrov. "Operation North Star," Emily said, recalling her grandfather's letter. Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly. "He told you about North Star?" "Not details, just the name, and that Petrov was connected to it." Harrison moved to a secure laptop and typed briefly, entering what appeared to be multiple layers of security credentials. He turned the screen toward Emily, showing a decades-old photograph of a much younger Anton Petrov standing alongside several Soviet military officers. "Petrov wasn't just any advisor," Harrison explained. "He was GRU Spetsnaz embedded with Afghan forces to provide advanced training and to evaluate Soviet weapon systems in actual combat conditions. During the final years of the Soviet occupation, he was involved in a program to establish weapons caches throughout the region's stockpiles that could be activated by sleeper agents years or even decades later. Operation North Star was about locating those caches," Emily surmised. "Precisely. Your grandfather led a team tasked with identifying and neutralizing these stockpiles. They were remarkably successful, locating 17 of the 19 known cache sites, but they never found the primary depot codenamed Hades, which supposedly contained specialized weapons and intelligence materials." Emily processed this information, connecting it to what she had observed during the recent engagement. "The weapons I saw yesterday, Soviet-era modifications not typically available to Taliban forces." "Yes, we believe Petrov has activated the Hades cache and is using these materials to enhance Taliban operational capabilities. The specialized optics, the modified PKMs, the anti-tank systems, these aren't standard insurgent equipment. But why now, after all these years?" Harrison's expression darkened. "That's the million-dollar question. Intelligence suggests there's a timeline at play, possibly connected to something in the Hades cache that becomes strategically valuable only under specific conditions." "And my grandfather knew what that was," Emily said, understanding dawning. "That's why Petrov is interested in me. He thinks I might have information." "It's possible," Harrison agreed. "John was the only member of the North Star team who may have discovered Hades' location." Shortly before his death, he submitted a sealed report to Langley, accessible only to those with ultraviolet clearance. Whatever he knew, he considered it important enough to take extraordinary security measures. Emily thought back to her grandfather's letter, searching her memory for any clues he might have left. He knew I'd encounter Petrov. How could he have predicted that? John Hayes was many things, Harrison said with the ghost of a smile. But conventional wasn't one of them. He had an almost uncanny ability to anticipate long-term strategic developments. It's what made him so effective in the intelligence community. A thought struck Emily. The compass he gave me before I enlisted. He said it guided him through Korea, but he never mentioned using it in Afghanistan. What compass? Harrison asked, suddenly alert. Emily removed the worn brass compass from her pocket where she carried it as a talisman. This one? It's been with me since basic training. Harrison took the compass, carefully examining it with growing interest. This isn't just a compass, Hayes. It's a KGB-issue navigation tool with a concealed compartment. He pressed a hidden catch, and the base of the compass slid open, revealing a tiny cavity containing what appeared to be microfilm. He hid it in plain sight all these years, Harrison said with grudging admiration. Classic John Hayes. What is it? Emily asked, staring at the microfilm. Potentially the location of Hades, Harrison replied. And if Petrov has somehow learned that John passed this compass to you, that would explain his personal interest in yesterday's operation. Harrison carefully secured the microfilm in a special container. This needs to be analyzed immediately. In the meantime, you're being temporarily reassigned to a special task force focusing on Petrov and the Hades cache. Sir, with respect, I'd prefer to stay with my current unit, Emily began. This isn't optional, Staff Sergeant, Harrison cut her off. Petrov now knows your face and has a personal interest in you. You're both an asset because of your connection to John and a liability because of Petrov's focus. The best place for you is with a team specifically equipped to handle this threat. Emily recognized the logic but felt resistance to being pulled from the field based on a personal connection. Who's leading this task force? For now, I am, Harrison replied. And before you ask, yes, Lieutenant Davidson's SEAL team is being attached to the operation as well. Your performance together over the past 2 days has demonstrated an effective tactical partnership. The door opened and Lieutenant Colonel Anderson entered with Davidson. Briefing room is secure for the expanded discussion, Colonel, Anderson reported. Good, Harrison nodded. Lieutenant Davidson, I assume Lieutenant Colonel Anderson has brought you up to speed on the basic parameters of our situation? Yes, sir, Davidson replied, his expression serious, though I'm still processing the implications. The implications are straightforward, Harrison said grimly. We have a highly trained former Soviet Special Forces operator directing Taliban operations with access to specialized Cold War-era weapon systems, and he appears to have a specific interest in Staff Sergeant Hayes due to her family connection to intelligence operations during the Soviet-Afghan War. Davidson glanced at Emily, a new understanding in his eyes. That explains your familiarity with Soviet tactics. My grandfather taught me to recognize certain operational patterns, Emily acknowledged. It proved useful today. More than useful, Davidson said. Without your warning and intervention, my team wouldn't have survived that ambush. The admission seemed to cost him some effort, but his sincerity was evident. Harrison observed this exchange with interest. You'll both have the opportunity to work together further. Effective immediately, we're establishing Joint Task Force North Star to locate and neutralize the Hades cache, and if possible, capture or eliminate Anton Petrov. What's our timeline? Davidson asked. Compressed, Harrison replied. Intelligence suggests Petrov is operating on a specific schedule. We don't know his ultimate objective, but the pattern of his operations indicates an escalation towards something significant. 3 days later, Emily Hayes checked her equipment one final time as the Black Hawk helicopter approached their insertion point. The microfilm hidden in her grandfather's compass had yielded coordinates corresponding to a remote valley in the northeastern Hindu Kush Mountains. along with a series of cryptic notations that intelligence specialists were still decoding. But the most valuable information had been confirmation of the Hades cache's content, specialized Soviet-era weapon systems that included prototype directed energy technology, equipment decades ahead of its time when originally hidden. 5 minutes to insertion, the pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. Emily made eye contact with the other members of the assault team. Davidson nodded solemnly from his position near the door. Beside him, Garrett and Park performed final equipment checks on their weapons. 2 CIA Special Activities Division operatives, introduced only as Mason and Reeves, completed the team. "Remember," Davidson said, his voice clear through the team communication system, "this is a reconnaissance operation. We locate and confirm the Hades cache, document its contents, and exfiltrate. No direct engagement with enemy forces unless absolutely necessary." The team acknowledged with practiced efficiency. Emily appreciated Davidson's straightforward approach. Their relationship had evolved remarkably over the past few days, professional respect replacing his initial dismissiveness. The helicopter banked sharply, descending toward a small clearing designated as their landing zone. As the aircraft touched down, the team moved with practiced precision, exiting in tactical sequence and establishing a security perimeter. The Black Hawk lifted off immediately, disappearing into the night sky to minimize detection risk. After 40 minutes of careful movement, they reached the eastern ridge, overlooking the valley identified in the microfilm coordinates. Davidson signaled a halt, then directed Emily to her overwatch position with a series of hand gestures. She separated from the group, ascending a rocky outcropping that provided excellent visibility of both the valley below and the approach routes the team would use. Emily established her hide with practiced efficiency, arranging her ghillie suit to blend with the surrounding rocks and scrub vegetation. She set up her rifle on a stable platform, checked wind indicators, and began scanning the valley through her scope. "Overwatch established," she reported quietly. "I have visual on the approach route and target area. No movement detected." "Copy," Davidson acknowledged. "Main element proceeding to phase line Alpha." Through her scope, Emily watched the team advance methodically toward the valley floor. The first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the eastern sky, providing improved visibility but also increasing the risk of detection. Something caught her attention, not movement, but a subtle anomaly in the landscape about 800 meters west of the team's position. A rock formation that didn't quite match the surrounding terrain. Emily adjusted her scope, focusing on the area. "Possible structure at your 10 o'clock, 800 meters. Appears to be camouflaged bunker entrance." Davidson halted the team, using his own optics to examine the area Emily had identified. "Confirmed. That matches the description from the microfilm. We're approaching from covered route, Charlie." As dawn broke fully over the mountains, Emily detected the first signs of human activity. A single figure emerged briefly from what appeared to be a carefully concealed observation post approximately 600 meters from the bunker entrance. "One individual at observation post west of target," she reported, tracking the figure through her scope. The individual was dressed in local attire but moved with military precision, performing a quick security check before disappearing back into cover. "Professional security," Davidson observed, "confirms the site is active." The main element continued their approach, using terrain features for concealment. Emily maintained her overwatch, mentally calculating firing solutions for each potential threat area. She caught another flash of movement, this time closer to the bunker entrance. 2 figures emerged, both carrying AK pattern rifles, performing what appeared to be a routine perimeter check. 2 armed individuals at bunker entrance, Emily reported, demonstrating tactical discipline. Recommend holding position until they complete their patrol. After approximately 15 minutes, they returned to the bunker entrance and disappeared inside. Patrol has returned to structure, path temporarily clear. Moving now, Davidson confirmed. The team advanced rapidly but cautiously toward the bunker entrance. Mason and Reeves, the CIA operatives, took point as they approached the structure, examining the entrance with specialized equipment. "Entrance appears unarmed," Mason reported after a thorough check. Soviet-era mechanical locks. We can bypass. While they worked on the entrance, Emily maintained her vigilant overwatch. Something about the security pattern felt incomplete. If this truly housed valuable Cold War technology, the protection should be more substantial. She expanded her search pattern, examining ridgelines and potential hide locations farther from the bunker. There, on a distant ridge approximately 1,100 meters from her position, she caught the briefest glint of sunlight reflecting off glass or metal. Emily adjusted her scope, focusing on the distant ridgeline. For several seconds, she saw nothing. Then a slight movement revealed what she had feared, a concealed sniper position. Sniper, North Ridgeline, 1,100 meters from my position, she reported urgently. Team is under observation. Can you neutralize? Davidson asked. Emily calculated the shot parameters. Extreme distance, crossing wind estimated at 6 miles per hour, significant elevation differential, challenging but within her capabilities. Affirmative, she replied, already adjusting her scope and preparing for the shot. She controlled her breathing, establishing the familiar rhythm. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, wait for 4. Through her scope, she could now make out the distinct shape of a sniper and spotter team in a well-constructed hide. The sniper's rifle was oriented toward the bunker entrance where the team was working. Emily made her final adjustments, compensating for distance, wind, and bullet drop. She squeezed the trigger during the natural respiratory pause, feeling the rifle's recoil as the .300 Winchester Magnum round began its journey. The shot was true, striking the distant sniper's center mass. Emily immediately shifted her aim to the spotter, who was reacting to his partner's fall. Her second shot found its mark before the spotter could reach for a radio or weapon. Sniper threat neutralized, she reported. 2 enemies down, but our presence is now compromised. Understood, Davidson replied. Mason, what's your status on that entrance? We're in, Mason reported moments later. Inside the structure, the team discovered what appeared to be a sophisticated Cold War-era storage facility. Davidson's voice came through Emily's earpiece, describing what they were seeing. Multiple chambers. First contains weapons crates with Soviet markings. Second appears to be communications equipment. We found it, Davidson's voice held controlled excitement. Central chamber contains specialized equipment. Mason believes it's the directed energy prototype mentioned in the intel. Also, finding document cases likely containing technical specifications. Team be advised, Emily interrupted. Vehicle approaching from the north, approximately 3 kilometers out, moving fast. She had spotted dust trails indicating rapid vehicle movement along a concealed road she hadn't previously identified. How many vehicles? Davidson asked. Emily adjusted her scope to maximum magnification. Count 3 technical trucks. Estimate 12 to 15 personnel based on dust pattern. Petrov is with them, lead vehicle, passenger side. Understood, Davidson responded. This is definitely a prepared response. Team, accelerate timeline. We move in 3 minutes regardless of completion status. Emily kept her scope trained on Petrov's vehicle, calculating a potential shot. At this distance, and with a moving target, the probability of success was low, but the opportunity to eliminate such a high-value target might not come again. She prepared for the shot, adjusting for the vehicle's movement and the extreme distance. Just as she was about to squeeze the trigger, Petrov's vehicle swerved behind a ridge, disappearing from her line of sight. The other vehicles followed, suggesting they were taking a covered approach route to the bunker. Vehicles have changed course, Emily reported, moving to concealed approach from the northwest. Lost visual on Petrov. Team exiting structure now, Davidson said. Demolition charges set with 5-minute timer. The team had covered approximately 50 meters when the first shots rang out from a previously undetected position to the west. Emily instantly shifted her aim, identifying 2 shooters concealed among rocks approximately 600 meters from the team. She engaged immediately, eliminating both threats with precision fire. 2 down west, she reported. Continue moving. More fire erupted from multiple positions, indicating the presence of a well-planned ambush. The team took cover behind rocky outcroppings, returning fire while continuing to maneuver toward their extraction point. Emily worked methodically, prioritizing the most immediate threats to the team. Each shot was calculated, each target selected based on the danger they presented. A sudden explosion from the bunker entrance sent debris and smoke billowing into the morning air. The demolition charges had detonated, destroying the prototype technology and any documentation the team hadn't been able to secure. The explosion created momentary confusion among the enemy forces, providing the team with an opportunity to break contact and continue their movement toward the extraction point. As she settled into her new position, Emily caught sight of Petrov again. He had exited his vehicle and was moving toward the burning bunker entrance. His expression visible even at this distance, a mixture of rage and calculation. Something metallic glinted in his hand, not a weapon, but what appeared to be a specialized key or access device. And slung across his back was a hard-sided case similar to the one she had seen him carrying during their first encounter. Emily prepared for the shot, knowing this might be her only opportunity to eliminate the man who had haunted her grandfather's legacy. The distance was extreme, nearly 900 meters, with variable wind conditions and the additional complication of smoke from the burning structure. She steadied her breathing, calculating all variables, and gently squeezed the trigger. The round cut through the morning air, covering the distance in less than a second. At the exact moment of impact, Petrov moved, turning to shout an order to his men. The bullet struck him in the upper shoulder rather than center mass as intended, spinning him around but not incapacitating him. As he fell, the hard-sided case he carried slipped from his grasp, falling open on impact with the rocky ground. Through her scope, Emily glimpsed its contents, not weapons or intelligence documents as expected, but what appeared to be biological containment units with Cyrillic markings. "Petrov is hit," she reported. "Upper right shoulder wound. Be advised, I'm seeing what appears to be biological containment equipment in his possession. This may be more than weapons tech." "Copy that," Davidson acknowledged, his tone sharpening. "Mason, you getting this?" "Affirmative," the CIA operative responded. "Priority shift. We need a sample if possible." Emily immediately chambered another round, preparing for a follow-up shot, but Petrov had already been pulled behind cover by his men. Several fighters formed a protective circle around him, dragging both him and the case to a vehicle. "Petrov is evacuating with the case," she reported, multiple personnel protecting him. "Can you interdict?" Davidson asked. Emily assessed the situation. The distance, movement, and increasing smoke made precise shooting nearly impossible. "Negative. Too many variables for a clean shot." "Understood. Continue covering our withdrawal. Extraction helicopter is inbound." 6 months later, Emily Hayes stood at her grandfather's grave in Arlington National Cemetery. The summer sun warmed the polished granite of his headstone as she placed the SEAL Team Challenge coin atop the marker. Her father, James, stood beside her, his expression solemn but proud. "He would have loved seeing you continue his work," James said quietly. "Not just the operational aspects, but the purpose behind it." Emily nodded, thinking of all that had transpired since that first ambush in the Hindu Kush. Task Force North Star had successfully secured or destroyed all 3 additional cache sites identified in the recovered documentation, dealing a significant blow to Petrov's operations. Though the man himself remained at large, his network had been severely compromised, and intelligence suggested he had withdrawn to regroup. "I understand him better now," Emily replied. "Why he taught me what he did. Why he prepared me for something that seemed so unlikely." Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. That was Dad's gift. He could see patterns others missed, connections that wouldn't become clear until years later. After leaving the cemetery, Emily reported to Fort Bragg, where her new assignment awaited. Colonel Harrison had selected her to establish the Army's pilot sniper training integration program, implementing lessons learned from Afghanistan about the tactical advantages of diverse sniper teams. One evening, as she reviewed training plans in her office, Emily received an encrypted message on her secure terminal. Opening it revealed a brief text from Davidson. Ghost sighting confirmed. Sierra Nevada border region. Planning underway. Special task force being assembled under your command. Garrett and I are already on board. Your expertise required for in-game operation. Contact Harrison for details. Emily felt a surge of anticipation. The conflict with Petrov was approaching its final phase, and she would be leading the team to resolve it. She typed a brief acknowledgement, then opened a second message, this one from Colonel Harrison, containing operational details for what was being called Operation Legacy. As she reviewed the preliminary intelligence, Emily realized with a sense of profound satisfaction that she would be completing what John Hayes had started, neutralizing a threat he had identified long before others recognized its significance. On her desk sat her grandfather's compass, returned to her after intelligence had extracted and analyzed the microfilm. The brass casing was worn smooth from decades of handling by 3 generations of her family. Next to it lay her father's challenge coin from his ranger days. And beside that, the SEAL team coin she had earned in the Hindu Kush. The mission directive was clear. Locate and neutralize Anton Petrov and secure any remaining biological weapons components under his control. From her open office window, Emily could hear the distant sounds of trainees on the night firing range. The next generation of snipers learning the skills she had refined under her grandfather's tutelage. They were the future, just as she had once been when John Hayes first placed a rifle in her small hands and taught her to breathe like the mountains. Somewhere in the Sierra Nevada mountains, Petrov was planning his next move. The ghost remained at large, but now he faced an adversary trained specifically to counter him, carrying the combined knowledge and experience of the Hayes family legacy. "The most dangerous predator is the one you never see coming," she murmured, recalling her grandfather's words. Until it's too late. For Anton Petrov, that moment of recognition was approaching, and Emily Hayes would be there when it arrived, completing a circle that had begun decades before she was born.